Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. It is your host, the Oak Cliff Savage. This is going to be part 2 to the video that I dropped earlier. Basically going over the Dallas Cowboys NFL draft for the 2024 season. And where we last left off, we were talking about Marshawn Kneeland, their second round pick number 56. Out of Western Michigan. He's a defensive end and edge rusher, as they call it these days. Now, essentially, what I wanted to go into more detail about is, his potential impact both in the short and the long term. So, for example, in the short term, I believe I left off mentioning that Marshawn Kneeland would likely be a rotational player in this rookie season, 2024. Just because, we still have DeMarcus Lawrence, we still have Sam Williams, who will probably be the starter on the other side on the defensive end. And you still have Micah Parsons to factor in coming off the edge as well. So best case scenario, Marshawn Kneeland will be a rotational piece along the defensive line. Don't get me wrong, he's a big physical player. One of the things that I wanted to really focus on was his impact more so in the running game. Because we know that that's where DeMarcus Lawrence has, really made his bones in the NFL, has really stamped his claim as one of the best NFL players. And so one of the really key statistics I wanted to look at here was the tackles for loss. That's where really DeMarcus Lawrence sort of excels. So we're looking here, Marshawn Kneeland had about 7.5 tackles for loss his last season. 2023, the season before that, he had about 10 tackles for loss in 9 games, which is really good. So I would say that production-wise, if we were to compare him to, let's say, DeMarcus Lawrence and his tackle for loss production rate, you would see it's really similar. That again is where the strong side defensive end really makes his presence known, is really in the running game. And so I would say that, the production again is very similar, but for at least this very first season, you're probably not going to get that out of Marshawn Kneeland. Again, he'll be a part of a rotation. And so that's why I had to sort of downgrade that second round pick. It just wasn't, at the time, like I said, Tyler Nubin went off the board. A lot of guys, but at this particular point in time, all of the running backs were still available, right? And so with the pick this high, I'm just of the mindset that you go and get, someone who will be an instant impact type of player. It's not like we can't wait until next year to get DeMarcus Lawrence replacement or what have you. Meanwhile, we're passing up on a guy like Trey Benson, who again has that ability to be like a generational type of running back. I truly believe that Trey Benson has all the qualities, the capabilities, and the mindset to really be like an Ezekiel Elliott type of running back, really a Zeke 2.0, if you will. But again, this is the Cowboys, zagging when they should have zigged, It's just something that we've come to expect from this team. But again, in the overall grand scheme of things, I'm not really too upset about the Marshawn Kneeland pick. Looking at all his measurables, his production, things like that, and where he was rated in terms of the draft, I could see the justification for making this selection. But, I would much rather have had like an instant impact running back, just to be perfectly honest with you. Like I said, you had your pick of the litter at this point. You did an excellent thing by trading back in the first round, picking up an extra third round pick. So if you take a running back here, you can still finagle a way to get you an edge rusher to get some help on the defense as well. But, they just, again, sometimes it's going with, the herd, if you will, or the sort of sheep think or group think. Because, just honestly, yes, you could say that Marshawn Kneeland individually was rated as a higher player than Trey Benson. He is, at least according to these ESPN metrics, but I don't see it, man. Like, you're talking about a rotational defensive lineman versus potential starting running back, a long-term starting running back in the NFL, someone who has the ability to score points and really affect the outcomes of games, honestly, more so than Marshawn Kneeland. And so that's just where I'm at with it. Like I said, I'm not trying to downplay the young man. I'm sure he's a fine athlete, but it just, at this point, sort of splitting hairs and just trying to really put together the best possible roster, and we're going to need a running attack. I mean, I think we all saw that from last year. So moving right along, the Cowboys also in the third round when it got so as I was mentioning, going into the third round, the Cowboys had two selections. They had pick number 73 overall, the 9th pick in the third round. Now also their 24th pick, I believe, was number 87 overall. So as you can see here, like I said, they passed up on Trey Benson for Marshawn Kneeland. Not a move that I would have made. As you can see, 6 foot 216, still ran a sub 4.40, 4.39 in the 40 at the combine. And just, I really would have gone with Trey Benson there. Would have made the recent free agent signing that I'm going to cover here in a bit even that much more potent, right? So I just would have went with Trey Benson with that second round pick where we took Marshawn Kneeland, and then I would have taken Cooper Beebe, which was an excellent selection. I have zero qualms about this one here. Cooper Beebe is someone who, obviously was highly touted. He was the Big 12 Offensive Lineman of the Year for the past two seasons, 2023 as well as 2022. He was a 4-year starter. He played pretty much every position on the offensive line. I do believe the Cowboys have plans on plugging him in at center, seeing what he can give us there. But, I think for the long term, he is actually the replacement for Zach Martin over at the right guard spot. So my guess is they're going to play Cooper Beebe at center just because he's that much of a talent, that much of an impact player for this season. And then next season, he'll move to right guard, more so on a long-term, permanent basis. And they'll probably just draft another center. But this, I think, is an excellent pickup, both in the short term and the long term for this upcoming season. Like, imagine we had our first round selection, Tyler Guyton. Our second round pick was Trey Benson. And then our third round pick, Cooper Beebe. Like, you know what I mean? That would be a much more enticing, draft in those first three selections. If I'm just a fan looking at it and saying, okay, now we can really do some things, offensively in the run game, right? But they zag sometimes when they should zig. But Cooper Beebe was actually not one of those selections. They actually got it right with that one. But again, it's the second round pick that really sort of chaps my you-know-what. But nevertheless, we go down here to their second, third round selection, and you see they went with the linebacker out of Notre Dame, Maurice Olawale. I believe is how you pronounce that last name. Highly rated player. As you can see, they actually had him ranked 133rd overall. So it's one of those things where I think we reached here based on need. Simply because obviously we do need to beef up our defense, our run defense in particular. Maurice Olawale, about 6'2", 234. Definitely has the ability to play multiple linebacker spots, strong side, middle, weak side. I believe he could play all three. He can match with tight ends. He's good in coverage. He, obviously is able to shed blockers pretty well. Plays with great effort. I mean, you don't really have to know much about him. You can just look at his name and tell he's one of those like island boys, probably from Samoa or, some Polynesian or something to that effect. But he gives you that Troy Polamalu vibe. I don't say that to be disrespectful in any way. It's actually, I say that to be very complimentary of, those players from those modes, like a Troy Polamalu, for example. Just play like their hair is on fire, very intense. I think he could help us, but again, it goes back to that really obvious need we have at running back. Like if you take a look here, the pick right after that, you see the Green Bay Packers, who already had a pretty premium type of running back with Josh Jacobs. You see them go and supplement that and get a Marshawn Lloyd. You see what I mean? A few picks before, you see Blake Corum go off the board. He went to the Los Angeles Rams. So right around this point, we skipped out on a running back with the second pick. Here was your opportunity to make up for it. And the Cowboys, again, zagged when they probably should have zigged on this play. At this particular point, not only is Marshawn Lloyd available, but you also have Braylon Allen, Jalen Wright, Bucky Irving, just other backs who I feel like could also be potentially in that class of elite level running backs, could be in that class of, hey, this guy could potentially be a 10-year starter in the league, an Ezekiel Elliott 2.0, possibly. Marshawn Lloyd could be in that category, right? But once again, the Cowboys zagging when they probably should zig, and it was so frustrating. So, like there are pros and cons. I'm not trying to down Marshawn Nealon nor Maurice Olawale, but at the time, as the draft was going, it's like, listen, man, we really need a running back, and we just didn't get one for whatever reason. So it knocks down the Cowboys' overall draft grade, in my opinion. It just does. But moving right along, we continued on, and it pretty much got worse because we never addressed the running back position. We just never addressed it. Fourth round, we didn't have a fourth round pick. Again, shout out to Trey Lance. But the fourth round was really the sweet spot where we see a lot of the good running backs coming off the board. Bucky Irving, Braylon Allen, Ray Davis, Isaac from Louisville, Jalen Wright went in the fourth. Like, that was the sweet spot. And us knowing that we didn't have a fourth round pick going into it, why didn't we take one before that? So moving right along, fifth round, we start to see here, it was actually a compensatory selection, but at least we had one. Kaiden Carson, a guy who at this particular point in time on the draft board, many didn't expect to be there. I went and looked at some of his tape. He's a very physical corner. I love that about him. He's like in your face, in your hip pocket, as much as you possibly can be as a defender without drawing a pass interference. But the downside is he didn't really have a high number of interceptions. So his playmaking ability when the ball is in the air isn't necessarily where you would want it to be, but that could possibly improve. But just the fact that he's so technically sound and so physical that he's always literally in a receiver's hip pocket, like, that's something that is highly coveted, and is something that I can understand the Cowboys not wanting to pass up at this particular point. And by this point, I had pretty much given up as far as the running back conversation. I mean, there were still a few good ones left, as you see here. Tyrone Tracy went to the Giants, pretty good running back out of Purdue. But by this point, pretty much all the backs who I wanted were gone. So we'll just continue to evaluate this draft here as we go to the sixth round. and we looked for the selection. It was Ryan Flournoy, Southeast Missouri State, which I didn't even know existed. I'm just going to be real with y'all. As you can see here, overall 317th ranked. We took him at 216, a bit of a reach. But he did run a 4.44 at the combine. He was a combine invite, so that's good news. 6'1", 202, pretty big. When I watched this film, definitely physical, reminds you of like a Dez Bryant type of receiver. Definitely big and physical. And he has big playability, averaging, about 15 yards per catch over the last 2 years. Like I said, big physical, strong hands. But at the same time, like, there were other receivers who we could have taken at this particular point in time, who I think would have had a little bit more notoriety, a little bit more success. But it's just one of those situations where we possibly could have found like a diamond in the rough. That happens. Every draft, there's always some guys who, over exceed expectations, who underperform their expectations. We just never know. I mean, we're kind of looking at this and saying, hey, like maybe a guy like Brendan Rice, who has obviously the pedigree, similar size, a much higher overall ranking in terms of him as a prospect coming into this draft. But again, it's just one of those things where, the Cowboys maybe see something that, we us layman fans don't see, or it's probably just a situation where, again, they want to be the smartest in the room. They tend to zig or zag when they should have zigged, and that pick, Ryan Flory, probably is one of those, just to be honest with you. So anyway, Nathan Thomas, the next selection here in the 6th round. From what I understand, he's probably going to move inside to guard. He played tackle at the University of Louisiana. Big, physical, has great, upside in terms of just his physical traits. 6'5", 330 pounds. But again, he'll probably move inside. From what I understand, his arms aren't very long to be able to play tackle at the NFL level, so he's probably better viewed as a guard. I would probably say maybe like a swing backup guard for, possibly Zach Martin, or even on the left side for Tyler Smith if he can really improve his game. But from what I understand, he has great hands, quick feet, and basically he's able to move people. And that, from what you can see, the Cowboys' strategy was really just to get more physical, more nasty in the trenches, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And so with this pick, you can see that that's where they were going. And then the final pick that we had, Justin Rogers, defensive tackle out of Auburn, 6'3", about 330 pounds. He's more so a long-term developmental prospect, someone who the Cowboys will look to, probably develop in the long term. I believe he's more of like a 3-tech, but he probably could be a 1-tech. I mean, it just kind of depends. You don't really know. Obviously, we have a new defensive coordinator, Mike Zimmer, so it's all going to be dependent on his strategy and how he sees these players and where he wants to work them into his scheme. But Justin Rogers will be definitely like a longer-term prospect. I don't expect him to see the field very much this season. But again, you never know. He could develop pretty quickly in OTAs and mini camp and training camp. And who knows, but overall, I would have to give the Cowboys 2024 NFL draft I'll give it a C+. I think that's fair, but again, just the total ignoring of the running back position, I just have to knock you down for that. As great as the first night started, A+ with the trade back, getting the extra pick, even you know, the second round, like I said, if you wanted to just go Marshawn Nealon there, fine. But one of those third round picks, again, I like the Cooper Beebe selection, so probably the Maris Leofow selection would have had to have been a running back in order for me to boost that grade up. But I got him at a solid C plus for this grade. But again, if it pans out and we're a much more physical team, then, you know, it pans out. The last point that I wanted to do to kind of tie this all in is talk about the Cowboys did actually go ahead and sign Ezekiel Elliott. If you go and watch one of my recent videos, I mentioned how they signed Royce Freeman, and I thought they should have signed Ezekiel Elliott instead. Well, the Cowboys doubled back maybe a day or two after the draft was completed and went ahead and signed Ezekiel Elliott. It's a 1-year deal worth up to about $3 million. So it's good. You know, I'm glad to have Zeke back in the fold. You know, I think that behind this offensive line, especially these young physical guys now, he can really show that he still has plenty of juice left in the tank. Again, in the previous video, we went over the numbers as far as his time in New England, how they compared to Royce Freeman's numbers. So go and check that video out. But I think the signing of Ezekiel Elliott, if you want to include that in as far as the draft and really just all of the offseason moves that the Cowboys have made, the 2 free agent signings with Royce Freeman as well as Eric Kendricks, plus the draft, plus signing Zeke. Overall, I give the entire Cowboys offseason like a B minus. You know, they definitely could have done more, but again, it all comes from the, you know, Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones. They all just want to, you know, sort of do things that are outside of the box and not be so obvious so that, you know, they can look like geniuses. And that's really just my opinion. You know, that's subjective, but from what I can see, that's the way that they operate. So, you know, it just is what it is. We'll see how it works out. Let me know what you think of the video. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. I appreciate you for taking the time to watch, and I'm out. Peace.